Thank you.
Thank you very much, and lots of questions, but I'll limit myself to one. On the question of supporting infrastructure, if you look around here, there are 2 electric vehicle charging points down on the Luxembourg place. There are another couple up near the bookshop on the Avenue des Arts, but therefore what we could call standard electric vehicles. Now, is the assumption here that the LEVs will be domestic vehicles and that they will be supported by domestic infrastructure, or is there a place, to come back to this question about charging points, for there to be supporting infrastructure in the city so that if you're using your LEV, you know you will be able, should you need to do so, to charge it so that you can reuse it again for your journey. Is there a place for supporting infrastructure in this context?
So Lucas, has Brussels thought about that?
So basically the way we develop the infrastructure for electric vehicles is that, so we have several priorities. So what we want to do, the first one is it has to be aligned, the way we develop our network has to be aligned with our mobility priorities. So basically we will not put one charger per car today. We are trying to have 25% less car use in 10 years, so we will have a slightly less developed network. We are trying to develop it step by step, so we don't want to have too many chargers. We are trying to meet the demand and probably be a little bit faster than the number of electric vehicles that we have. And it has to be renewable energy flowing in the stations. I think it's a very good question. And the last thing probably is we try, so you see probably a lot of EV charging points in the street, but most of them will have to be off street because we want to have as many people charge off street, less, more space for pedestrian bikes, green infrastructure and stuff like that. It's a very good question because I think that most of the trips taken in Brussels are not that long. So you don't need too many infrastructure, I think, because people don't have to charge every day. And so we have to think really about what are the needs. And it's a good question because at the moment in Brussels, there is no need for charging infrastructure for like very, very light and electric vehicle because there are none. But if the question comes up, I would be happy to think about it. Yeah, but it's a good question, to be honest. I have no idea how a small and electric vehicle charges. Can it plug on a regular EV charging?
I think the great majority of these can be charged from a domestic supply. And so it really is about the proportion of public chargers. And I know the work I've seen is that the great majority of electric vehicles to date, obviously mostly cars, are charged at home, slowly, overnight. So, we already we have much of the infrastructure in place there. I don't know if DLR wants to say anything about that. But please, yes.
Because I can answer the question. First of all, most light electric vehicles just use household plugs. And when the first Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive was developed, we, with our association, have really worked hard to make sure that it would also include that infrastructure that was going to be developed for Europe. Seemingly, or not seemingly, the next generation of the directive is being developed, and I just got an email from the Parliament where an advisor is informing me that she has the biggest problems in the world to convince her colleagues that there should also be infrastructure included for light electric vehicles. So this is the problem that we are constantly confronted with, that in all the, as I showed you with the maps for the Green Deal and so on, that light electric vehicles are just systematically overlooked and systematically forgotten. And it is not so difficult, in our opinion, to integrate in the charging poles for cars also provisions for light electric vehicles. So it's a pity that this is not being taken on board, as it is a pity for a lot of legislation. Sorry for interfering.
No, no, thank you. Anik, another question back at the back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, citizens. I have to announce myself, as it's the web streaming also. I'm Angelos Harlaftis, EPAFOS Advisors. We represent the EcoWaves movement, the pan-European and Mediterranean movement, which is based in direct democracy, in science and in ecology. Of course, it's a very important theme here we have, and I agree with you that in Brussels we need more actions. But it's not understood why not, you haven't yet organized the bicycle streets. From 2014 you had the money, but this is not going so fast, so the actions are up to you, because the money there were, but they were not implemented, and a lot of us who are using this new and modernized way of mobilizing, they had the accidents. I agree with Mr. Kyriakopoulos, who says that everything is in behavior. Behavior not only between humans, but also between in the future with things, the Internet of Things, with the vehicles, which will be for sure smart, and other machines like robots. So as engineers in the city level, we think, as Mr. Kyriakopoulos suggested, that the total point of view that we have today has to change, because it's another level of robots which are delivering for B-posts the parcels to the citizens, not a human, but a robot, which already they are using, and in China and in USA. We don't have to see only USA. We are Europeans. We have to see the European models, and we have to research and inspect what the others are doing, the USA and the Chinese and whoever has any kind of technology to implement. Belgium is very good in this, Brussels not so much, but outside of Brussels there are cities which in the centers they use such technologies very well, and for the families and for everybody in the centers. So this is the most important, that we have to design the future of the infrastructure in another perspective, in another vision, because also we have to take in mind, into consideration, after 50 years, we can circulate also on the air. We're experimenting everywhere this thing, and we don't need only to use the wheels. We can fly. So the last point is that the sharing methods is the future word. Belgium is very good on the legislative point of view, because even in the private sector or in the citizens' perspective, they can share their goods and they can circulate in the cars. So sharing, it's the new word for us, the Europeans. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anyone with a question in the room? Next to you there.
Good morning. I am a journalist and also a user, as we all are, of roads, cars, or whatever can carry us so that we don't have to walk. We love walking, but sometimes we can't just do the job on foot. Okay, and this I suppose we agree. My question has to do with safety. Yes, safety. Safety between the different models of lightweight vehicles and the capacity of protecting the body. The body is exposed in most of them, and in some others it is fully protected, like vans, trucks, by a big car chassis. But in small cars, if they have to be lightweight, what will happen if there's a crash? So this crash worthiness, a crash with what? With one of the other EVs, which are light but huge, and God knows what merchandise they carry, a big bulk, so I mean it's heavyweight. It's like a boxing ring. How are we going to transform the streets in a boxing ring? Lightweight, middleweight, etc. Who's going to win then? And pedestrians, please, do you have a clue for pedestrians? They are overwhelmed, and they're the ones who are the first scared of this wonderful progress. So just how do you manage, how do you do with the configuration of all these, let's call them items, even if we have humans in the list, all these moving objects? And they all have an autonomy. They all go somewhere, come from somewhere, have to stop somewhere. What do you do with this big, moving picture? Thank you.
So do any of you, I'm reluctant to keep coming back to Brussels, but you're the one with the direct city experience. How do we best manage safety? I'm conscious that what we're in at the moment, or what we have been in for decades, is an arms race where we add weight to vehicles to increase safety, thus increasing danger, thus increasing the need to add weight, and we go upwards and upwards with weight, and we somehow need to wind that spiral back down.
Maybe to answer, I mean, there were lots of remarks, lots of questions, so I will do my best to answer, and if it's not enough, just say it. But so basically, I completely agree with you when you say that cities should act too. I'm not here to say the EU should do everything, and let's stop there. So Brussels is doing a lot. It's definitely not enough, I agree with you. But to give you an example, I don't know how long you've lived in Brussels, but I've been here my whole life, and I can see with my own eyes the way the city is changing. And so just to give you an example of what happened in the last couple of years, you have a huge pedestrian, it's one of the largest in Europe, a huge pedestrian zone that is now existing in the city center. You have 40 more kilometers of bike lane that were installed last year. You will have a huge traffic calming plan in the city center, so the Pentagon, you know it, that will start starting from August. So we are doing our best. We should go much faster, but what I can tell you is that the changes are visible in the infrastructure, but also in the way people move around, because if we have bike counters, you can see the evolution. It's like a doubling every year of the number of people on bikes. So I'm not saying it's fast enough to reach our climate change target, to reach the WHO targets, but what I can tell you is that in Brussels, the boat is gone. We are doing it, and there are still a lot of projects in the boxes that are coming in the coming years and decades. So we need to be aware that everyone is not ready for that change. So we need to take everyone aboard, which is why it's probably slower than what I and probably you would want. But at least we are showing the way. And what we see is that in other cities in Belgium, people are looking at us, at the low emission zone, at the bike lanes and stuff like that, and they're starting to think about what their cities could look like. So on the security side, we have the generalized 30-kilometer zone that was implemented last year, and what I can tell you again is that numbers show that the number of people that have an accident and like traffic killings and very, very heavy accidents has drastically dropped, and it's not like 1 or 2 people less. It's really, in terms of percentage, it's huge. I'm not following that topic very closely, but I can provide you with the numbers. So what I think is that it's bad to have a SUV. You don't need a SUV in a city like Brussels, but if there are SUVs, they have to respect the law. They have to be at a very slow speed. They have to respect the pedestrians. They have to respect the bikes, and that's how it will work. That's what we will do. We will enforce it. We will change the way streets are designed to make sure that these cars are not too fast. So I have lots of other things to say, but I think I will stop there.
Okay, we have an online question pointing out that, as we know, an LEV occupies less space and has lower weight than a regular car. Have we considered the advantages of that in terms of parking and air pollution challenges in urban areas? I wonder if Lucas would like to...
Well, obviously we have a range of light electric vehicles, and for some it's clearly an electric scooter, when it compares to the physical footprint of a car, is incomparable, basically. But some vehicles are also larger, so if I understand well the system, sometimes the replacement would be on a basis you replace a big vehicle with a small, but sometimes it's roughly 1-to-1. Of course, with parking, I'm sure that cities, for decades, every city, one of the primary things that they do, and they listen to complaints from their citizens, is about parking and parking zones and parking spaces. But in general, when looking at light electric vehicles, we obviously, if we increase their numbers, we will have to think about parking, for instance, maybe specific or at least at workplace parking. My colleague has mentioned, and I'm a Brussels resident, of course, and everybody's worried if these vehicle parkings are safe enough for. I don't want my light electric vehicle to be stolen. So maybe, for instance, for companies that have garages, maybe they will. This is again not a European top-down approach, but maybe they would redesignate space in their garages to see. And I think I started with there was a hint in the question about air quality impacts. I started with what I've been doing, and I mean it is so obvious that if replacing a polluting conventional vehicle with any kind of a light electric vehicle, you will have benefits that Brussels or other cities will be very keen to see to improve the health of their population. So specifically, I don't think, I mean, the general trend is there. So air pollution charging, I don't see, as an air pollution expert, a difference between a small electric vehicle and a big electric vehicle when it comes to air pollution charging. So it's a zero emission vehicle. It doesn't pollute anything locally. So I don't know if the question is hinting at that direction or not. But
yeah. Thank you. One thing that I've been looking for an example for years is car parking charged by the length of your vehicle. You know, we could accommodate, I don't know, 3 times as many LEVs in the same parking space, but there's no parking concession for me to do that. And surely that needs to be thought about. I'm not going to suggest that Brussels should, but that surely needs to come.
Maybe just to jump on that, we don't have, so basically we thought about that, but we don't have the data in the database that we use to charge how much you have to pay. Yeah. You have to link it with a federal database that doesn't include the length of the car. So it's just like small changes like that, like collecting the data, how long is an Audi or whatever, how long is a BMW.
Yeah.
We have to put that in a database, link it with the way we charge cars, and then we can do it. But at the moment, it's impossible.
I just want to
please
say exactly the same. I mean, going back to the previous question, first of all, because I think safety is of primary concern. And again, to reiterate that not two vehicles, two light vehicles, that they look the same or they have the same volume, behave the same in the crashworthiness. That's far from that. So this is not the issue. Second point is that just like was just said, it was in my mind since a long time. But all these decisions should be data-driven, should be data collection, should be state-of-the-art analysis by VUB, by DLR, by reputable institutes, and decisions to be made not, let's say, as a perception, or it looks like, or I think so. There's no think so or perception in these terms. It's a kind of detailed analysis of data.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's a dynamic issue. I have to impact assessments at the European Commission level or at national level should come back and look carefully this data, and then decisions to be taken. It's not about how Michael thinks so or how George thinks so. You know, it's about a data-driven problem here. It has lots of parameters, has a lot of dimensions, so all these have to be considered carefully.
So one of the studies that perhaps I'm not aware that there is a study of the fluid dynamics effects of smaller vehicles in a city, for instance. There may be, and if anyone knows that, I'd love to, but that's perhaps something that needs to be looked at as well, the science of movement around cities with smaller vehicles. I've noticed that the gentleman here has waved vigorously several times when we're talking about kinetic energy and safety, and I'm wondering, do you have anything that you would like to say on that?
Of the book, and I have a long experience in the car industry. Well, there's so many questions I could touch upon. Well, one of my key questions is that, well, my key points is that safety doesn't need to lead to very heavy weight. It is possible to do a one-seater, three-wheel, four-wheel with less than 400 kilograms, complying with all the safety requirements of the passenger car M1. And there are a number of borderlines in the definition of the L6 and the L7 that are drawn for political reasons 30 years ago. When the market was opened, certain smaller manufacturers need to be protected, and therefore the weight and the dimensions have been drawn in such a way that a wall was built between the small passenger car and the larger 3- and 4-wheelers. And I deeply regret that I have to read that the manufacturers now are ditching their small passenger cars. Well, I would like to give some explanation in a smaller group, because I think there are opportunities to correct that if we go for sharing components and platforms between LEVs, or I prefer small electric vehicles, because the 3-wheelers can go up to 1,000 kilogram, while the 4-wheeler can go to 450. Very remarkable situation. So I think there is a lot of good work to do. And it's not only about technical research, it's about historical and legal research. And maybe not developing more platforms, but less platforms. And looking at the basics. Well, I can talk on for hours.
So it sounds like you're suggesting basically that as well as a simplification of regulations, it ought to be, if you like, more fact-based around questions of safety.
But also you have the issue of the driving, well, the traffic code. And well, let me give you this example. In the village where I live, I know people that are used to drive on a bicycle lane, and that now recently are shifting to the car. And why are they doing that? Because they're afraid of these ugly cargo bikes on the bike lane. So the cargo bikes, sorry to shock you, but the cargo bikes are pushing certain people back from the bicycle to the car. One of my solutions would be to have a cargo bike with 3 or 4 wheels, a seat belt, and some of the components that are used to protect against crashes in the passenger car. Still at a low speed of 25 or 30. And don't say that passenger car components and platforms are expensive. If you look at the cheapest passenger car on the European market, they are often cheaper to buy than some of the small 3-wheelers, quadricycles that are produced in small series. Well, I've written 7 articles about that, but there is a lot of room for improvement, I think. Sorry, I'm going to stop here.
And I'm sure you know, of course, that in certain ways, certain cities in China are miles ahead of us in this. There's a wild proliferation of vehicles, perhaps less regulation and so on. But I'm not sure we can regulate ugly out of the...
heavy wheat or whatever.
Sure. Any other questions in the room? Otherwise, can we go to this end, please? Caught you on the hop a little there, Ailey, sorry.
Thank you. I'm also in DG Research and Innovation. I'm advisor for Sustainable Development Goals. So as we know, one of the mantras of the Green Deal is deeply transformative policies. It also looks at systemic changes. So keeping this in mind, where do we put the focus between improving each and every mode of transport and, on the other side, working on the system and improving the mobility system as a whole, which would then also imply issues such as infrastructure, behavior, substitution, and also maybe some form of directionality. So how do we get it right, both in research and in policies, to be most conducive to this overall objective of the twin green and digital transformation? Thank you. I hope this was not too challenging.
I couldn't agree more with you, Arnold. I mean, all these issues are well said. I mean, of course, cities like Brussels and cities like Paris and other big cities, of course, much bigger than Brussels, they have acute problems of traffic and congestion. But again, as Arnold said, we have to see this in a kind of a more holistic manner. It's not only about congestion, it's not only about local quality. There are many more issues addressed in the Fit for 55, on the Green Deal, industrial policy, citizens' rights, and everything that has to be addressed in a weighted manner.
Well, I don't have much to add to that, I must say.
But I think the question is about where we should put the weight in this, and I'm wondering...
Where should we put the cursor between working on improving each and every individual mode of transport versus working at the more systemic level and improving the system and making the mobility system more sustainable?
I think it's like a probably both. Where do you
But that cursor is the most complex thing that we can think of. We basically, you're asking a question, should we just try to improve the whole system, everything, every service, every technological step, or should we look into, more mode-specific categories, which are sometimes 40 years old or not? But, well, it really depends on the situation. You have sectors such as aviation, who have so completely different issues and technological challenges than another sector. So I think that we, in the institutions we're working on, I don't think we'll leave any sector behind, and then we are working on all of them, and hopefully, and I think it does, it fits into the big picture.
Absolutely. Yes.
So it's a pity we've lost our MEP, because that would have been a wonderful question for him, but I think we need a whole cohort of them to talk to this about. There's another question at the back there, I believe.
Yeah, thank you very much. As a manufacturer of L7E vehicles, I have a really simple question. Why is the L category not included in the calculation of the CO2 emissions for fleet? Because this is something that all the manufacturers could profit a lot, and I don't see a reason why they're not included. Maybe you know a bit more about that.
Well, I can add, if you meant is that fleet targets are already very complex when we are talking about cars, for instance, which are heavily regulated, not just for sustainability, but for safety, for taxation purposes. Countries have databases. A colleague is mentioning here that we don't have a Belgian federal database doesn't contain the length of the vehicle. If there is no test for a different motorcycle, electric motorcycle or a conventional motorcycle to determine its CO2 emissions, and there are so many variants there, you cannot build the proper fleet target, because for cars we know the fleet, we know the composition of the European fleet, we know their emissions per vehicle, per every single model out of hundreds of, maybe 1,000 models, and we can build a fleet target. While for light electric or light conventional vehicles, there is such a widespread range of them that I think, just from some experience of building that regulation, would take years and years, while obviously, and this event shows that the reality is moving, and we have a very clear path and a clear arrow of progress, even without a fleet regulation for small electric or small vehicles. So I think most of the answer would be complexity and in devising and implementing such a regulation.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I'm not going to repeat anything from what you just said, but again, when we do these impact assessments, we need data, and if there are no data on this, simply it's not considered. So it's assumed that it's negligible. It's assumed that this doesn't change the system. So for the rest.
On the question of regulation, we've had a question online. The Dutch government currently is working on new national regulations for LEVs that don't match with EU harmonizing goals that we're talking about here today. Is the Commission going to react to that, or should it react to that?
I think this is one of those when we say we cannot comment on because really a national legislation proposal, if I understand correctly, it's really within the merit of member states and my colleagues in the internal market department to investigate or to check.
So perhaps a quiet word to the colleagues to look at that and
That there
see
is
if-
something coming.
that there's something coming and whether it's of concern. Do we have any more in the room, please? Yes, one at the back there.
Sorry. Thank you. I'm Florian Dirks from the Belgian Climate Administration, and I wanted to jump into the last question we had from the audience, and that is related to the fleet-based CO2 targets. I was wondering whether you think there's a room or a way to include energy efficiency standards within the current CO2 cars advanced framework, more specifically as we currently have a correction factor which advantages mass in the calculation of the CO2 targets, which I historically understand as because electric vehicles are heavier than fossil-based cars, but do you think there's a way to also regulate energy efficiency and mass, and in which regulatory framework should be European, which European regulation, or should it be dealt with on another level? Just your reflections would be nice.
Yeah, I don't know if you can give us any detail
That's
on
a
that.
good question, I would say. Very straight to the point question. First, I would come back to the impact assessment of the CO2 standards, the new ones that have been proposed by the Commission in July. And that's a very in-depth assessment. And one of the parts of the assessment was, from what I remember, is that we need to be clear and quickly applicable. So if you, that's a general thing. If you have a system that works, you might decide to tighten the screws of the system and make it more robust or ambitious or whatever you want to call it, or you can try to devise a new system which might work, might be a bit better sometimes or not, but it entails risks of delays, and we have a climate law and definite targets for 2030, society-wide targets, not just for transport, and we have to act upon them. Introducing energy efficiency while a logical, or I understand where the question is coming from, it again goes deeper into maybe devising the whole system of the vehicles that we have now differently. But I would just add a quick note. If we are moving to an electric or zero emission world, the efficiency is your design goal. You can either, yes, you can put tons of batteries and try to get, let's say, 500 kilometers of range. You will have an expensive vehicle. It's going to be big and heavy and not very, very useful. But you have a comparative advantage if you work on efficiency. If you work on efficiency, you can get the same range for the lower price, or for the same price, you can get a higher range. We are moving into a world from where the design of the vehicle, the full design, with conventional vehicles, it was all mostly about the engine, and should you pick 1.5 liter or 5 liter engine, it's a completely different thing. But with electric vehicles, you have to design them, not just the electric motors, you have to design the whole vehicle to be more efficient. You will get everything. You'll get the performance, you'll get the lower price. So that's a natural thing which might not need to be regulated, which will be market driven as we move onwards.
Yeah. I mean, all I want to add here is that partly was addressed in the presentation of DLR. It has to do also with the life cycle assessment, the fuel, the energy carriers, the source, the pathways of the energy that is used, and of course it's not only about CO2 emissions, it's much wider than that. It's not only about decarbonization, so to say. Carbon standard is not enough in many of these cases.
The point that keeps coming back to me, though, around not coming down too heavily on enormous vehicles is the range anxiety question. People buy cars with their greatest imagined use, but they actually only use them for that purpose, roughly, for the long trip to the other end of the country. 1 in 50 times, I think, or 1 in 50 of their journeys. So they're actually buying a massively over-engineered object for their everyday use and paying a great penalty for that. So there's something that somehow needs to be addressed there that I'm not quite sure that we've nailed, really.
maybe I'll jump with a couple of thoughts there. True, obviously. But one has to consider, the whole dynamic of the whole market. If you have maybe a person would choose to keep their existing car, conventional ICE diesel, for instance, and buy a light electric vehicle. Yeah. Maybe that will mean that for the kilometers driven, for the trips, they will have 90% of the trips in this light vehicle. Yep. But when it comes to longer range trips, they will use the other vehicle. Yes, as an alternative, if they buy a big electric vehicle which can deal with everything, sometimes maybe it's better to have one vehicle instead of two vehicles. It's really case-by-case basis. You have to see it. Sometimes it doesn't have a general rule or a general law that says that you can have 5 different vehicles, or should you have one. Some will fit very well into some customers. Other customers will maybe look for a vehicle which covers all of their needs, but they're going to have one vehicle. So there is room for everyone.
There's a pertinent comment which came in a little earlier around this. Someone saying that light electric vehicles clearly have a huge potential, but cannot replace all car trips. So we still need cars. Should LEVs be added to the car stock, but not replace them? But isn't that more inefficient in terms of having lots of useless objects sitting around that we've overbought?
I think the study showed it very well, and I think the experience we have in Brussels shows it as well. People don't need to own a car, and I think if people want to have a big car to go on a very long trip, they can just rent it, and it's cheaper, it's much less impactful on the environment, and what we need to remember is that car companies don't have any interest in making us understand that. We see that the ads that are on billboards in the streets of Brussels, but also in the streets of other countries, are for big cars. We see that the models that are in the market are huge. So, yeah, to me, that's the way to go. We need to stop promoting these huge cars because we don't need them, and probably we need them for 1%, 5% of the trips that we take, but we can't rent them. And it's the same probably for light and electric vehicles. We don't need one. Probably a bike because you use it every day, but not the rest.
Yes, I've heard it said that the truly civilized city is one where you do not need to own a car.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Any more questions in the room at all, I think? We're more or less cleared in the room. There's one more comment online. To reduce traffic stress and increase safety, I recommend we introduce a new European LEV type and regulations with a maximum speed of 32 kilometers per hour, equivalent to the US standard, which would be interesting for shared production in markets, and harmonized with traffic speed limits. Safer, more fun, and with enough guaranteed range. Is there any possibility of this becoming a new regulation? I think we've covered that pretty comprehensively, but I think it's fair to say that we all broadly would say that we would like to see something in that area, and let's hope that moves can be made through corridors, public and private, to make that the case. I think we can now move on, can we? Annick, are we ready to move on to your winding up? Because I think we've come to the end of the questions in the room.
To this discussion,
yes.
As the manager of LEVA-EU, I've listened very carefully and I'm very enthusiastic about some of the things that I have been hearing. And I think that we really need to continue the conversation and the discussion to see how we can work together to move light electric vehicles forward. But there's one or two things I would like to say. I understand that technical rules are DG GROW, but at the same time, those technical rules result in terms of use which are under DG MOVE or which come under the national member states. And if we do not get an approach where everything is considered together, then we end up in the situation where we are now, where, for instance, just one example, a speed pedelec is in L1EB, a moped, and then upon that, the member states start considering it as a moped, whereas it's a completely different vehicle. So I just give you this example to say that we really need to look at LEVs from a generic point of view, and if there would be a system to bring the different departments involved from the Commission together, that would be a great thing. And I will certainly take up Mr. Demuelenaere's comment on the cities need the Commission. We will start engaging in a larger debate, I think, with the cities to see how we can work together to together move light electric vehicles forward. But in any case, on behalf of LEVA-EU, thank you very much for your presence and for your contribution. It's very valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, Eddie? Microphone. This is Eddie Eccleston, who is on the LEVA governing body.
I'm a member of the TC333 group, and cargo bikes is becoming a big issue, in as much as you've mentioned safety and being on the cycle path. If you are allowed to go to 30 kilometers an hour, they can be put on the road. At 25 kilometers an hour, they're going to obstruct traffic and become dangerous, or dangerous to ride a cargo bike. So that's really something that you must consider. And to have 250 watts to carry cargo is crazy. It's impossible. And you must remember that electric bikes, it was adapted from the moped. It wasn't for itself. And that's really important, that you produce standards which are not adapted from another vehicle, but exclusively for that. And we get nowhere. And the third point is the machinery directive. It's crazy. And to have transport in the machinery directive, which I know the Commission is trying to remove, but there is opposition within the industry from traditional bicycle manufacturers not to have it removed. It stops competition and innovation, so that there are motivations for this. So we have to have a real conversation about how we can move it forward for the benefit of everyone. Last comment is to Brussels. When the UK London brought in congestion charges, not overnight, but almost overnight, cycling quadrupled. So get your congestion charge in. It's a good advice. Thank you.
So I think it's fair to say we all acknowledge there are problems, and from what we're hearing, both local government and at EU level are ready to listen and engage on how we need to solve this all. So I think we're done for now. So thank you very much, everyone. We will be returning at 1 o'clock. There are a few vehicles. Oh no, what are we doing now? Oh, conclusion. Oh, so I thought Annick... oh, I'm terribly sorry. So you'll be talking now for summarising what we've been saying. Yeah, okay, thank you.